1991, Street Fighter II revolutionized the arcade industry by popularizing the fighter genre and changing the video game industry. For years, Capcom's rivals did everything they could to compete with the new franchise through their own fighting games. One of them was SNK, which released the first Fatal Fury game in 1991, and followed this up with World Heroes in 1992. Both games were fighters that were similar to Street Fighter II in several ways, and went on to attract their own following of arcade enthusiasts. In 1993, however, SNK really threw the genre for a loop with Samurai Shodown, a game that was completely unique for its time. While Street Fighter II clones were a dime a dozen, Samurai Shodown was a pioneer in many major ways. Unlike almost every other fighting game on the market, Samurai Shodown incorporated weapons, and they weren't just cosmetic additions, they played a major role in how the matches unfolded. When both players slash at the exact same time, they also lock swords, where players must press buttons rapidly to gain the upper hand. Weapons could be knocked out of an opponent's hand, and this crippled them in a severe way. Unless they move back to the weapon and pick it up again, they remain extremely vulnerable, and a crafty adversary can often take advantage and end the match. In addition, Samurai Shodown used a rage gauge not found in other games, and this became a defining feature in all of its sequels. Whenever a player receives damage, a special meter fills up on screen. The amount of rage gained is proportional to the opponent's attack strength. When it's full, the player's skin turns red and the gauge becomes animated. At this point, the character has higher power level than normal and allows them to execute special moves. This mechanic added a new layer of gameplay that no other fighting game offered, and really was one of the title's main draws. In contrast to every other fighting game that arrived during the Street Fighter II craze, Samurai Shodown features unique, classic, Japanese imagery. The game is set in 18th century Japan, and although there are several fictional and mystical elements added, the game really does a good job of incorporating a lot of the actual samurai flavor. There were also some foreign characters like Galford added to justify departures from the main theme, but you can still tell this is truly a Japanese game. From the clothing of the characters to their fighting styles, earnest effort was made to fill this game with distinctive samurai lore. At the time, most fighting games required that one player do many hits to an opponent to end the match. In Samurai Shodown though, everything is a trade-off. Some of the moves, including even the most basic ones, differ greatly in terms of speed and execution time. This means that some of the brutal hits, though slow, can knock off a huge chunk of the enemy's health. If your opponent isn't quick, you can really take advantage of them. Graphically, Samurai Shodown was a spectacle in every single way. The colors were extremely vibrant, and the characters had amazingly detailed animations that built upon what SNK had done in its previous fighting games. Just scrolling through the cast of characters, one can see how beautiful these graphics were. My favorites in this one were Ukyo and Halmaro, both of which I played a lot in the arcade. On the topic of graphics, another thing that needs to be pointed out is that the stages were just breathtaking. The colors and animations in the background were awesome, and really stood out for a game in 1993. Galford's stage features crowds cheering on the fight, complete with ships and a sea in the background. There's even barrels that can be sliced open in combat. There's also a stage with flowing waters in a tribal setting, and even one with a classical Japanese scene depicting the samurai fighting on cliffs, with rushing waves that crash into the rocks in the background. It's also very detailed, and even today, I think all the visuals still hold up. The title was also one of the first fighting games in the US market to depict blood. Even though it doesn't do so as gratuitously as Mortal Kombat, seeing this on screen at the time was very new, and sometimes controversial. When it was first released for the Neo Geo, the color of the blood was changed from red to white, and the fatal attack animations were disabled. This decision upset many fans who had expected the game to mirror its arcade counterpart. That was the primary selling point of the Neo Geo after all. Also, Samurai Shodown uses a refined version of the camera zoom system that SNK first incorporated into Art of Fighting. This really made the battles feel more action-packed than they otherwise would have, and gave the player a greater visual impression of their distance from the opponent. The camera style became a staple of Samurai Shodown and many of SNK's other games for years to come, and it was just another facet that made the game stand out. The other great touch to this game was there were short cutscenes where the victor of each match taunts the opponent with corny lines and trash talk. Most of the statements are cheesy, and many are incredibly funny. It really was a great little touch that added to the appeal of the franchise, and if you were playing a friend, it was always a good way to boast about your triumph. The same emphasis on classical Japanese culture was also apparent in Samurai Shodown's soundtrack. Rather than the upbeat, techno-driven arcade songs that were popular at the time, the game instead embraced traditional Japanese instruments. The result is a soundtrack completely unlike virtually every other arcade game at the time. There is some variance when it comes to stages for the foreign fighters, but overall, it's a very Japanese-inspired soundtrack. I can certainly remember this sticking with me when I was younger, because the game was just so unique in this way. One of the coolest facets of Samurai Shodown is that you can slice your opponent in half. It was an awesome way to put an exclamation point on your victory, and it was really visually impressive for the time. There's really a lot to like about this game, but I think we can all agree that the best part is that Earthquake can fart on you. I mean, come on, who doesn't want to see that? Samurai Shodown was eventually released for both the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Unfortunately, both versions are subpar ports of the arcade and Neo Geo alternatives. They just don't have the same graphical quality and smooth controls that one would expect if they originally played the title in the arcade. The SNES version did use a 32MB cart, but it lacks the camera zoom in and zoom out feature that the fans were so fond of. It's just such a different feel, and if you're used to the arcade and Neo Geo versions, you'll only be left disappointed. It was also remade and given a graphic overhaul for the PlayStation 4 in 2019. However, if you want to play this one today, I recommend grabbing the SNK Arcade Stick Pro or the recent Samurai Shodown Neo Geo collection for the PS4. You'll thank me if you do so, because those are the more classic versions that retain all the original qualities that made the title great. All in all, Samurai Shodown represented a risk that paid off in spades for SNK. Though it was unorthodox in almost every way, it carved out its own space in an industry and attracted a cult following that still exists today. It also had the advantage of being released on the powerful Neo Geo AES, allowing enthusiasts to bring the actual arcade experience into their living rooms, something that just couldn't be done with Street Fighter II and its ports. Like Metal Slug and the King of Fighters, it was also the start of a great franchise for SNK and really helped put the company on the map for years to come. It wasn't my absolute favorite Samurai Shodown game, but the original title was definitely the most innovative. It effectively created a new subgenre of fighting games so unlike the others on the market, and sticks in my mind as one of the best arcade games of my childhood. It definitely had more layers of depth than its rivals, and should be praised for it today. I can still pick this one up and play it in the contemporary, with all the great nostalgia that comes with it. If you like this review and remember Samurai Shodown, leave a comment below about the most memorable aspect of the game to you. If you like my videos, please subscribe to my channel and click the bell below to be alerted upon the addition of new ones. Also, please consider supporting my channel via YouTube's Join feature to receive member exclusives, such as advanced videos and complete video transcripts.